All right, coming up today, the Ottawa Student Transportation Authority is set to unveil more details on how it plans to safely take your kids to and from class. What protocols should be in place when it comes to buses? U Ottawa epidemiologist Dr. Raywat Deonandan joins us now with his expertise. Good morning. Thanks for joining us.
Good morning. How are you?
I'm well. All right, let's talk buses this morning. What are you thinking when it comes to getting our kids on the buses? We know it's mandatory for kids in school for grade 4 and up to be wearing masks. Should all the kids be wearing a mask on the bus?
I think so. But more importantly, we have to remember the two best ways of keeping kids safe. Number one, of course, is always driving the incidence rate in the community as low as possible, which means that everybody else in the community has to do their part. We have to wear our masks, socially distance, even if we haven't got kids or work in a school. That's the first thing. Number two, the most important way to keep kids safe is physical distancing. So in a school bus, that means as much space between them as possible. And if you can't physically distance, then you put something in the way of droplet transmission, like a mask or a face shield. So I'm a fan of masks and of face shields, especially on a bus. Why not double down on the protection? It's only for less than an hour during the trip.
Would that also suggest then that we should have as many parents who can driving their kids to school as opposed to taking the bus to just minimize the amount of kids on the school bus?
I'm careful. I'm reticent to say that because of the ecological impacts and the stress on families and things like that. I don't want people going into further debt and turning their lives for this. But in general, yeah, if we can keep the number of kids in the school bus low, which means having more parents take responsibility for driving their kids to school, that will help.
Is it possible to do it safely then with what you're recommending, getting all the kids on the bus and getting them to and from school safely in this pandemic?
It's possible to lower the risk. We can't eliminate the risk. It's important to remember that overall, across the province, the overwhelming of kids and families will be just fine. The probability of anybody encountering someone with the disease and getting it from someone with the disease is really quite low. The risk here, what we're concerned about, is that schools can be accelerators of the pandemic. So when you scale this up to 10,000 schools and hundreds of thousands of kids, someone's going to get it, and we have to prevent that handful of cases from becoming outbreaks. So can we get the risk down very low? Yes, we can. So the things that we can do include the mask, distancing on the school bus, as well maybe prearranged seating, having kids from the same cohort in class being compelled to sit near each other. If we can enforce that throughout the year, then we reduce the possibility of spread.
What about waiting at the bus stop? A friend of mine said that there are 16 kids who get on the bus stop where her son gets on. How should that play out?
That's a really good question. I haven't thought about that before. That should be a little more enforced in terms of spacing. While they're outdoors, the risk is, again, minimal. It's not zero, but it's minimal. But as the weather gets bad and shelters are used more and more and people have to cluster underneath a shelter inside a building, it gets a little more dangerous. So again, the mask becomes more and more important, especially in that clustering kind of arena. And I'm going to double down on my recommendation. A mask plus a face shield offers that double dose of protection, especially for small children.
What are the main factors that parents should consider if they're trying to decide whether or not to even put their kids on a school bus? What are the main factors they should ask themselves before coming to a decision?
One, what is their alternative? If they can't drive the kid to school, then they have no alternative. If they can't keep the kid at home, they have no alternative. Number two, you can protect your child if the society won't protect your child by, again, giving your child a mask and a face shield. Number three, you can advise your child not to associate with large numbers of people, to avoid touching others and to leaning in and having intimate conversations with others. And as well, you can advocate for your school board and your school to have these procedures in place, like the prearranged seating, like the enforced distancing, and also have adult oversight, especially in places where the kids gather waiting to get onto the school bus. Mm-hmm. I think it can be controlled, but it takes effort on everyone's part and constant vigilance, unfortunately.
I want to get your take on this. We've talked about masks in schools before. We know that the province is recommending it being mandatory for grades 4 through 12. But we have one trustee here who is going to put a motion forward with the English Public Board this week that all students, the younger ones, wear them too. And we do know that the largest board in this country, in Toronto, passed that. So all kids at the Toronto Public Board are all going to be wearing masks. Given what you know today, with what we're learning about COVID-19, should we be changing that up and make it mandatory that all students wear masks?
I think we should, with a light hand. kids, especially small kids, won't be able to do it well. That's okay. They're going to fidget. They're going to touch their face. That's okay. The goal here isn't perfection. It's just getting more people to behave responsibly and to mitigate transmission. It can also be a learning experience. It can be a lesson about hygiene and public health, which is an important thing to learn about in schools these days. Why not? Let's try it. Of course, a handful of kids won't be able to for medical purposes. We have to make accommodations for those kids, again, via face shields possibly. But yes, I see no reason not to attempt to make this more widespread and common.
You think that would make a big difference when it comes to the numbers this fall?
It might. As I said before, schools can be pandemic accelerators. Again, most kids and most families will be absolutely fine. Even if they do get it, they'll be absolutely fine. The trick here is to prevent a child from bringing it home to their ailing grandparents and from preventing a school outbreak from becoming a reason to close down all of the economy, right? So every little bit that we do to mitigate the probability of community transmission slows us down to that eventuality of shutdown again. We definitely do not want that. We're on the lookout for that horrible second wave that we're all afraid of. And there's a fair chance the second wave will be ignited by a school outbreak. So let's minimize the risk by deploying all the strategies we can.
Always great to chat with you, Dr. Rewat Deonandan, epidemiologist, University of Ottawa. Appreciate your time.
Thank you.